at least in any public way, the Defense Department, the State Department, the Department of Homeland Security, none of them have undertaken any systematic study of Islamic theology and law or the words and deeds of Muhammad to understand what those things might show us about the motives and goals of the terrorists. None of it is being done. And yet, as far as I'm concerned, we should respect our opponents enough to take their statements as they have come to us, and to understand that when they tell us their motives, we should take them seriously. When they tell us this is why we are doing what we are doing, we should use that as an opportunity to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Now that would lead, of course, to certain policy implications. We have the president having said, after 9/11, you're either with the terrorists or you're with us. And yet the chief enabler of terrorism around the world is still counted as an American ally. This is a scandal of immense proportions, and I think it comes into a great degree from a misunderstanding of these elements of Islam that are fueling this fanaticism and violence today. We have also billions of dollars going, even without the question of oil, which complicates everything, billions of dollars going to states like Egypt and Pakistan, which are both allowing their mosques and schools to teach Islamic supremacism, warfare against Jews and Christians, anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, hatred of the West, and they're not being called upon it. If the president were to say that we are in a defensive action against Islamic jihadists, who are, whether they're true Muslims or not, whether Islam is a religion of peace or not, they are working according to these principles with these goals, then if you teach these principles and these goals in your mosques and schools, you are no friend of the United States and will not get a penny of American aid. It would seem to me that would be a little bit more effective to combat this threat in the long term. We need also to call American Muslim groups to account. There is, 5 years after 9/11, although many protestations have been made that these groups are against terrorism, there's no organized nationwide effort to teach Muslims in mosques against the jihad ideology, to teach them how to resist the jihad recruiters who come to them in person or over the internet or in any number of ways and make, on the basis of Quran and the teachings of Muhammad, a case that this is what they ought to be doing as Muslims, to be loyal Muslims. There's no comprehensive effort to combat that. And many, of course, questionable elements of many of these groups, which have had people, of their officials, arrested and convicted of terrorism-related activities. I would ask of these allegedly moderate Muslim groups, how is it that you hired these people? If your vision of Islam is so different from theirs, how is it that they got by your vetting process? You didn't ask them about the most pressing issues in the globe, or all around the world today? This immense crisis is engulfing the Islamic world, and you didn't talk about it? This kind of double game has to be called, but in order to do that, there has to be a resolute rejection of the relativist and politically correct multiculturalism that has just spread a fog over the public discourse today and strangled honest discussion of these issues that have to be addressed if we are going to meet this threat effectively. People say, if you talk about this, then you'll be aiding a clash of civilizations. Well, you know something? I don't have to aid a clash of civilizations. It's already happening. I didn't make it up. People talk to me about these things all the time. A Muslim professor wrote to me recently and he said, I hear you were continuing your shameless lies. Now you were saying Muhammad married his daughter-in-law. Well, you know, Muhammad married his daughter-in-law. That's referred to in the Quran, chapter 33, verse 37. It is attested in numerous hadith, traditions of Muhammad. It is in the earliest biographies of Muhammad. It is in the earliest histories written by pious Muslims. But the fog of deception is so thick that this gentleman thinks he can get away with acting as if I, through my black Zionist arts, have cast it into these books somehow and made millions of Muslims around the world believe it. Now this in microcosm is what we're facing in all discussions of terrorism and the jihad around the world today. People are so anxious to believe falsehoods and half-truths, and people are so uninformed about these issues that they are falling for deceptions of the most naked kind. This has to stop, or the clash of civilizations will certainly be upon us, and we will not be the victors. Thank you very much.
We will have some time for questions. As always, we have microphones that we would ask you to wait for so that our audience outside the building can also hear your question. And as they always say on Jeopardy, we would indeed appreciate it in the form of a question. And we would ask the courtesy of at least identifying yourself, name or some affiliation, even if it's nothing more than John Smith, Washington, D.C. That would be helpful. And I'll start back at the back.
Matthew Ballin, Heritage alum. You said in the Iranian premier's letter to President Bush that he had free will in the matter to convert to Islam. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that comment, because I thought that there was no free will according to Islamic teaching.
Well, that's actually something that throughout Islamic history, going back to the earliest days, has been a point of controversy, because there are many quotations in the Quran that, that teach free will, and many that teach an absolute determinism. And there was a very large schism and controversy over the Qadaris in early Islam who taught that there was free will, and they ultimately were the losers in the controversy. However, there is generally accepted, particularly from someone who's not speaking as a theologian, but speaking as a pious layman, as Ahmadinejad was, I believe, generally accepted the idea that there is free will, and that certainly the choice must be made. But he also said, as I noted, that there are consequences for the negative choice, in which I believe he was referring to Muhammad's dictum that one follows the invitation to Islam with warfare against those who reject it.
Here, we'll come on down in front and work our way back and over.
Hi, Dr. Spencer. My name's Kevin Mooney with the Cybercast News Service. This past election, I understand a Muslim was elected a member of Congress, and I'm wondering if that opens the door to any untoward influence of U.S. policy that would concern you.
Well, you know, one congressman is one congressman, and there are 434 others. My concerns about Keith Ellison are about the money he's taken from the Council on American Islamic Relations, and the fact that the Council on American Islamic Relations has never come clean about the fact that two of its co-founders came from the Islamic Association for Palestine, which was a Hamas group, and that Nihad Awad, one of them, has declared his support for Hamas in the past, which he only disavowed recently in the, during the time of the Ellison campaign. And that several CARE officials have declared that they would like to see the United States become an Islamic state, even by peaceful means. I'm glad that they want to do it by peaceful means, but I find that the fact that they share the same ultimate goal as the jihadists, I don't find that reassuring. And I would like to know what Keith Ellison's ultimate intentions are. Would he like to see the United States Constitution replaced by Islamic Sharia law? And I think these are questions, unfortunately, that people were afraid to ask him because they didn't want to be politically incorrect and be tarred as bigots. Well, you know, there's no bigotry in trying to defend the United States Constitution and in trying to be alert to possible threats to it. President Kennedy was very forthright in dealing with the religious issue when it was completely spurious and based on prejudice and hysteria and real bigotry towards Catholics. When you have Islamic spokesmen around the world saying they want to establish Islamic law over the West, it is not at all bigotry to ask Keith Ellison what he thinks of that. But it hasn't been done yet, as far as I know.
Al Milliken, affiliated with Washington Independent Writers. Those that promote democracy and even look at that as a kind of religion, how do you reconcile their thinking with going into Muslim-dominated societies? How can democracy not support Sharia law when the majority of a population is Muslim?